Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life, but wearing your own skin? Like you're moving, breathing, talking, yet none of it feels like you. You smile because you should. You say yes when every fiber of you aches to say no. And when the day is done, when the world is quiet, and there's no one to perform for, you feel the weight of an invisible audience that never leaves. If that sounds familiar, you're not broken. You've just been taught to betray yourself, beautifully. It starts early, before we even have words for it. The good girl, the golden boy, the child who learned that love is earned, not given. That approval is safer than honesty. That being liked is better than being real. We learn to scan faces for signs of disappointment, to read moods like maps, to shapeshift, just enough to keep peace, keep love, keep belonging. And no one ever told us that every act of self-abandonment leaves a scar you can't see, but you can feel. It's the quiet ache you carry into adulthood. You call it anxiety, people-pleasing, overthinking, exhaustion. But really, it's the grief of never having been fully yourself, and still not knowing if it's safe to try. You see, this isn't about being kind or considerate. It's about being invisible in your own life. Because somewhere along the way, you made a deal. If I can just keep everyone else happy, maybe I'll finally be enough. But the truth is, that kind of happiness is rented. And the rent is paid with your silence. Psychologist Alfred Adler once said, "We are not determined by our experiences but by the meaning we give them." And many of us, quietly, painfully, have given our lives a meaning that isn't ours. We've mistaken being agreeable for being loved, being useful for being worthy, and being admired for being safe. But none of that is freedom. Freedom is when you don't have to shrink to fit into someone else's comfort. It's when you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of rest. It's when you can walk away from applause, because it's not clapping for who you really are. And that kind of freedom scares us. Because once you stop living for others, you have to face the question, who am I when no one is watching? That question is a doorway. But most people avoid it their entire lives. Because walking through it means facing every mask you've worn, every smile that wasn't real, every dream you gave up because someone else didn't understand it, and the part of you that wants to be liked by everyone. That part will scream when you try to choose yourself. But choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's sacred. It's not a rejection of others. It's a return to you. You were never born to be someone's idea of acceptable. You were born to be whole. To feel the sun on your skin without asking if it's okay. To laugh too loud. To cry when it matters. To say, no, I don't want that life. I want mine. But we don't get there by force. We get there by grieving. Grieving all the years we played roles that weren't ours. All the dreams we postponed until they shriveled into politeness. All the truths we swallowed until we forgot their taste. This is not easy work. Unlearning who you had to be, so you can become who you really are. Sometimes that means being disliked. Not for being cruel or careless, but for no longer offering yourself as a mirror for someone else's comfort. It means not explaining your choices to those who were never going to understand you. It means disappointing others, so you can stop disappointing yourself. And yes, it hurts, because being liked can feel like safety. But it's not the same as being loved. Being loved doesn't require your performance. It holds space for your complexity. The part of you that's soft, and the part that says, no more. So ask yourself, what would you say if you weren't afraid of losing their approval? What would you do if you weren't editing yourself for someone else's comfort? Who would you be if you finally stopped apologizing for existing? You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real. And sometimes, real is messy. Sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes it means walking away from everything familiar, because you've outgrown it. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who they wanted you to be. Not who they praised. Not who they needed you to be when they didn't know how to love themselves. You. Just you. That's the quiet revolution. Not chasing approval. Not adjusting yourself to avoid being disliked. But daring to exist without permission." But what happens when you finally stop living for others? And there's silence? No praise. No applause. No one to say, good job. Just you. That's when the real loneliness arrives. Not the loneliness of being without people, but the loneliness of meeting yourself for the first time, and not knowing if you'll like what you see. Because when you've lived your whole life through other people's eyes, your own reflection feels unfamiliar and terrifying. You'll question everything. Was I ever actually kind? Or was I just afraid of being rejected? Did I really want that job? Or did I just want to be impressive? Was I ever truly loved? Or was I just useful? These questions are not cruel. They're your rebirth. Because to live for yourself doesn't mean you discard love, or loyalty, or care. It means you offer them from choice, not from fear. And that distinction changes everything. There's a part of you, the younger you, who still believes that if they displease the people around them, they will lose love, be punished, be abandoned. That part is still waiting for a permission slip to be real. But the truth is, no one is coming to write it for you. That permission has to come from you. You have to be the one who whispers, "It's safe now. You don't have to earn your place anymore." And yes, people may leave, but the ones who leave when you become yourself were only ever in love with the version of you that didn't exist. Let them go. Let them walk away from the lie. Because the people who are meant to walk with you, the ones who are safe, who are true, who are capable of real love, they will only recognize you when you stop hiding. But let's be honest, even when you know this, the fear doesn't go away. You'll still feel the old reflex to check their face before you speak, to downplay your joy so no one feels insecure, to water down your grief so no one feels uncomfortable. And that's okay. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing truth while your hands still shake. And what is that truth? That your life is yours. That your time, your energy, your voice, your dreams, belong to you. You are not a background character in someone else's story. You are the main character of your own. And that means you don't need to be universally understood. You don't need to explain your boundaries until they feel convenient to someone else. You don't need to soften your truth just to make it easier to swallow. You don't need to offer a version of yourself that's been trimmed, polished, and rehearsed. You get to be whole. Even if that wholeness comes with edges. Even if that wholeness means someone else is uncomfortable with your joy, your sadness, your clarity, your refusal. You were not born to be palatable. You were born to be free. But here's the paradox. To live for yourself, you must face everything in you that was trained not to. You must look at the parts that still crave applause, that still flinch at silence, that still associate rejection with danger, that still whisper, "If I'm not enough for them, maybe I'm not enough at all." And you must meet those parts with love, not judgment, not shame, just presence. Because those parts are not your weakness. They are your survival. They are the echoes of a younger you, who once learned, being liked is safer than being honest. Being useful is safer than having needs. Being small is safer than being seen. But you're not there anymore. You're not that child anymore. And this isn't about blame. This is about choice. Because as Viktor Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This is your space. This is the moment where you stop asking, "What do they expect of me?" and start asking, "What do I expect of myself?" And maybe, for the first time, you start living a life that feels like home. Not a performance. Not a constant audition for love. Just home. Imagine waking up one day and realizing you no longer need to prove anything. Imagine letting your joy be loud. Letting your anger be valid. Letting your no be enough. Imagine creating a life that doesn't look impressive to others, but feels peaceful to you. That's not rebellion. That's alignment. And alignment will always feel unfamiliar to those who are addicted to approval. But you don't owe anyone an explanation for your healing. You don't have to shrink to fit into their expectations. Let them think you've changed. Because you have. Let them say you're selfish. Because they benefited from your self-abandonment. Let them say you're hard to understand. Because your truth doesn't need to be translated. You are not difficult. You're just done being digestible. You are not too much. You've just stopped making yourself less. And this isn't the end of your relationships. It's the beginning of real ones. Ones built on authenticity, not transaction. On truth, not tolerance. On choice, not obligation. On presence, not performance. Because the moment you live for yourself, You stop begging others to see your worth. You become it, and in that becoming, you heal, not because the world changes, but because you no longer need the world's permission to live your truth. And maybe for the first time in your life, you start hearing your own voice again. Not the voice that tries to be correct. Not the voice that rehearses what to say before saying it. Not the voice that checks 100 times, will they still love me after this? No. The quiet one. The one underneath it all. The voice that never needed to be loud to be true. The one that waited patiently while you became everyone else but yourself. That voice is not angry. It's tired. Tired of the masks. Tired of the striving. Tired of sacrificing joy to earn love. And yet, still full of hope. Because even after all this time, it still believes in you. Not the polished version. You. The you that loves deeply. The you that cries when no one's watching. The you that questions everything. The you that wants more, not because you're greedy, but because somewhere deep down, you know this life is meant to feel like yours. You've spent enough time trying to be the right kind of daughter, son, friend, partner. You've spent enough time living according to other people's stories. Stories written by fear, culture, family wounds, or expectations that were never yours to carry. You're allowed to set them down now. Not because you've figured it all out. Not because you have a perfect plan. But because it hurts more to keep living a life that doesn't belong to you than it does to face the unknown. There is grief in letting go. But there is no peace in holding on to something that keeps wounding you. It's okay if the people around you don't understand. They may not be able to meet the real you. Because they never met themselves either. But your path isn't about convincing them. It's about returning to your own breath. You're allowed to want something different. You're allowed to disappoint them. You're allowed to disappoint everyone, if it means you finally stop disappointing yourself. That's not rebellion. That's healing. Adler's psychology tells us, we act not because of what happened to us, but because of the goals we've chosen. What if the goal of your life was no longer to be liked? What if the new goal was to be whole? That changes everything. Suddenly, you don't need every conversation to end in agreement. You don't need to be chosen, praised, or rewarded. You only need to be you. Messy, sacred, in process. You stop chasing the version of yourself that everyone else finds acceptable. You start building the version that finally feels like home in your own body. This is not about solitude. It's about sovereignty. Because when you live for yourself, truly, you become the kind of person who doesn't need to control others to feel okay. You stop living in silent competition. You stop measuring your life by someone else's applause. You stop seeing other people's joy as a threat to your own. You begin to love with an open hand. You begin to speak without rehearsing. You begin to rest without guilt. You begin to offer help from a place of overflow, not depletion. And the people who remain, those who stay even after you've stopped performing, they're the ones worth building a life with. Because when you are no longer begging for love, you finally make space to receive it. Without twisting yourself. Without proving. Without pretending. That is the beginning of real connection. Not based on roles or agreements or shared wounds, but based on truth. And sometimes, the truth is, I can't be what you want me to be anymore. Sometimes, the truth is, I love you, but I need to love myself more. Sometimes, the truth is simply silence. The kind that doesn't need defending. Because when you are finally whole, you no longer need your life to be understood. You only need it to be true. So if you're standing at that edge, between who you've been and who you're becoming, take the step, even if it's quiet, even if it's small, even if it's lonely, because you don't need a crowd to begin again. You only need a moment of honesty, a breath, a whisper that says, I'm still here, and I am mine. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to make it beautiful. You just have to begin. Let this be the moment you stop living to be liked and start living to be real. You are not here to be someone else's story. You are here to write your own. And it begins the moment you say, I choose me. If this resonated, you're not alone. Let me know what part felt real to you.